Taylor Walker from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Shannon Hurn from the West Coast Eagles.
This is Nathan Jones from the Melbourne Football Club.
Phil Davis from the GWS Giants.
It's Brad Avery from the Port Adelaide Football Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hello, you got MJ. Hope you're enjoying your week so far, and plenty of fantasy football news and information has been happening. The JLT Series has been getting underway, and there is lots for us as a fantasy coach to dissect. As really, you're just a couple of weeks away from months of preparation maybe starting to pay off. Maybe. Let's talk all things fantasy footy. I got a number of the panel. I got Rids on the line. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hey, mate. How you going?
Oh, look, I'm good. I felt like I just caught you distracted, but that's okay. I've also got Tim in the studio. Hello, buddy.
G'day.
And always, the recently inked Jimmy. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hello, MJ. Hello, boys. Hello, listeners.
It's a pretty impressive tiger on your arm, that's for sure.
She goes all right.
She does go all right, just like your tigers as well. There is plenty of stuff I want to talk about on this podcast episode. I want to talk ruck structures and strategies. It is the bane of existence for fantasy coaches this preseason, knowing what to do, who to put, where to put them. I want to talk about making your money count a little bit later on, especially around the type of cash cows we're going to look at selecting. And then in a few minutes' time, I want to get you guys to find me some unique options across all the formats, every single line. Find me a guy that's kind of 5% ownership or below that may be an absolute ripping starter selection for us. That's coming up right throughout this podcast episode. Right at the top of the gate, though, let's talk about the JLT Community Series. Jimmy, we'll kick it off with you. It's really the first time outside of those kind of intra-club match simulation and kind of those fake practice matches we got the other week with a couple of sides. It's really been the first time as a fantasy coach we've got to see fully televised, multi-camera angled, and maybe even visited like you did just a couple of nights ago. We're actually getting to see some of the impact of these new rule changes and impacts from the fantasy perspective. So rather than talking about specific players, what's some observations you've picked up that these new rule changes are going to bring to the game potentially, and how that could impact us as fantasy coaches?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, I went out to Icon Park the other night, and as a Tiger fan, going down there was not the best of experiences. That ground is about as good as their team, for one. But look, one of the main things I noticed, and that seems to be following the trend over the weekend now, is that those kick-ins, that extra 5-10 metres that defenders have got from, after an opposition behind, they are taking full advantage of that. There's been hardly any, if any, short kicks to the pocket like we used to get. And, all of them are going long invariably out to the wing there.
Let's talk about that. Tim, specifically for you, there are certain players that have benefited from those kind of chip-out kicks. Those sort of 10 to 15 metres right towards the wide of the pocket. Rory Laird is a notable Adelaide Crow premium defender, but is often seen over previous seasons picking them up. Does that give you some alarm bells in terms of starting him at that peak price? I still think he's going to be a very good premium for us this year, but do you think we could get some potential value later on? Because he was one of those premium defenders that often benefited from that little chip kick to the corner.
Yeah, well, it seemed to be a pretty comprehensive stat, wasn't it? That it was almost not happening, the chip into where you're saying Laird gets those little 6-pointers.
Yeah.
And Laird's pretty much priced at his highest ever average as well.
Yeah, he is.
So this is the highest price you've ever had to pay for him. And now you've got a rule change that appears to likely affect him somewhat. So it would seem hard to start with him on that basis.
Yeah. What about you, Rids? Are you concerned not just for a Laird, but the Laird type of defender that more often than not doesn't take the kickouts, isn't the target of the kickouts in terms of the long ball distribution, but that short chip out? Is Laird the main concern for you, or are there others that we should be keeping an eye out for?
I think there's definitely others. That you need to be careful about. I think there's a very popular GWS running defender that might be on that list.
Are you referring to someone that starts with the name Zachary?
Yeah, and also Lockie.
Yeah.
So there's two of those guys. They won't be taking many kickouts. You'd be thinking the Finlaysons and the Heath Shaws.
Perryman.
Of times gone by, yep.
Cummins, if he gets to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I just think it's a little bit of a watch and see type exercise, that's all.
Yeah, no, I think so.
Yeah, and I think on the flip side of that too, someone that's going to benefit a lot from this, and we spoke about him in the 50 most relevant a little while ago, is Sicily.
Yeah.
There's obvious question marks about just how many games he plays, whether that's his body or his discipline or whatever else, but he's the sort of player that is going to get that kick-in role more often now than perhaps he has before. And even when he doesn't, though, with the height and his marking ability, he's the type that will be a target 50 metres down the line as well.
Were you concerned, Tim, with some of the news when they were talking about James Sicily in the pre-season about how there may even be moments where Alistair Clarkson chooses to interchange Sicily and Gunston in terms of forward target, defensive target, and flip them over? Does a conversation or a moment like that you hear in the pre-season going alarm bells, or do you just hear this is Clarko just having a conversation? We know Sicily can play forward. He's become fantasy relevant for us as a defender. Do you get a little bit nervous when you hear that in terms of considering starting him? Or is it, if you're bullish on him, you should still very much be so doing that?
Oh, you can't just completely ignore it, but I'd be pretty surprised if they changed it too much, because Sicily's just been so good in that role. I think he wasn't tagged very often. Maybe Carlton was the only one who really attempted it, but he's just intercepting everything and dominating in that format. And I think when Gunston was back, that was mostly when Ruffy was out. Was that right? Sorry, no, I'm thinking the other way around. But he's basically, I think Gunston's up forward and Sicily's back unless they start losing, really. It seems a bit of a stretch that they'd want to do it for the whole season.
Yeah, fair enough. What about for you, Riz? As you kind of watched a number of games across this weekend, has there been any other observations that you've picked up that could have a fantasy positive or negative impact for us as coaches?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I've noticed. The big-bodied midfielders seem to be getting a lot more space in the centre square.
Yeah.
Yes.
So guys like Cripps, I noticed the other, last night, Yao and Dangerfield. And it seems like that when they gather the ball in the centre square, there's a lot more time.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing, okay. And the second thing I think, and this is just more of a gut feel than anything else, and it's only based off 2 games, is I think I like the defenders that are playing in the midfield rather than the defenders that are going to be like the general off half-back.
Okay.
I got a sneaking suspicion guys like Ed Curnow, Mav Weller, even Baguli the other night, like they're all going to start playing lockdown-type roles on these running half-back because it's one-on-one football. And so I think they're going to target quite a few of the running-type defenders, like maybe a Zach Williams, maybe whoever it is, Jaden Short, someone like
Brody
that,
Smith.
if they're really impacting the game. So I've got I've done a backflip. Start of the year, I was thinking guys like Brody Smith and Piers Henley were really, really locks at those prices.
Sure.
But now I'm starting to think guys like Andy McGrath, Callum Mills might be the ones that actually benefit the most.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I want to come back to that point in just a moment, but something you said really a little bit earlier intrigued me. You talked about these contested big ball winners dominating inside the midfield. Do they become even more so relevant? I suppose you could throw a Clayton Oliver into the mix of that. Maybe a Matt Crouch is probably not quite the bull territory of some of these other players. Dustin Martin certainly fits into that category. Do these sort of big ball-winning inside midfielders become even more relevant because they're less likely to handball it off? They're more likely to burst out of the stoppage and punch the ball deep inside 50 and get that extra clearance and that disposal by foot rather than by hand?
I think there's a twofold on this, okay? So I think Supercoach, yes. Okay, they're able to get the clearance easier, they're able to hit the targets, become more effective, and so on and so forth. But I think in DT and AFL Fantasy, it might actually restrict the congestion, the more ball ups and stuff like that. And it might actually become less relevant to a degree because they're only getting one shot at it rather than 3 or 4 shots at it where they're making tackles, they're getting handballs off, they're whatever else. So it's going to be really interesting to watch as we go forward because, I don't think I could say that Paddy Cripps could play a better game than what he did the other night against Essendon.
He looked good.
And then I watched the DT score after the game and the Supercoach score, and I was actually surprised he only scored 115. So I'm wondering whether it knocks those massive ceiling games for these guys down from 140 to 120 or not. So it really is a watch and see type scenario.
And the fact is, you're only a handful of games or so. You've got another JLT Community Series of matches next week for us to gain more data and information. You really are basing it off just a handful or so of games you've seen. Ritz makes an interesting point there, Tim. I'm keen on your thoughts. He talks about how maybe we may see some of the tackle count of these repeat stoppages being impacted. Does that hurt someone like a Devon Smith, who built his scores in Dream Team and Fantasy especially last year so much through tackle pressure and tackle numbers? Does that start to make you concerned about starting him even maybe more so than what you might have had? Because we're not, again, only seeing a handful of games. It's a small bit of data to be able to base it off. Does that concern you, though, seeing the low stoppage to stoppage to stoppage? Does that give you some concern there or not too much?
I think you'd have to wait and see a few more
Sure.
JLT games on it, because the tackle numbers haven't been that low for preseason games,
Sure.
even though the style might look like it. And you'd assume the tackle numbers should go up in regular season from preseason.
Bit more heat in the game, yeah.
So I don't know if it's dropped heaps, but sorry, Rids?
But just to jump in, I reckon that there's more back players, like defenders that are tackling more or forwards that are tackling more when it gets into the 250s.
Yep.
So guys like Francis Watson had 10 tackles last night. So I don't think he's ever had, he may not have ever had 10 tackles before in his life, but playing that role across half back where it seems like they push and they cause that congestion when it gets into the 50s rather than that centre ball clearance.
Yeah. The other thing I've noticed too is that that one-on-one positioning seems to stay, for the most part, fairly constant throughout the games as well, which means that a lot of those outside players aren't getting quite as much space as they used to. And so those tackle opportunities are still there because players, they're not tagging each other so much, but they're sticking together more, I think, than we usually see in season.
Is this because of just coaches kind of not revealing too many trade secrets and trying to sound each other out a bit, or is it just a little bit more bruise-free football that we see in the pre-season, or maybe a combination of both?
Oh, look, it could be any of those things, I suppose. Sure. Yeah, and as we've said, it's only a small sample size that we're making these observations on so far.
Yeah, it's one weekend of footy. Yeah.
Correct, and not even at this point. So by the time JLT is done and dusted, we might have a firmer idea on some of these things, but at the moment, it does appear that, initially at the centre bounce, there's a lot more space for those midfielders to create play and to gain a quick disposal and a quick clearance. But around the ground, that one-on-one pattern seems to be a little more constant than we might be used to.
And I suppose
the other thing, MJ, sorry to butt in.
That's fine.
The other thing that I've noticed is the big guys seem to be winning the clearance, from the centre bounces and going directly out to a wing.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the winger stays in his own spot or even pushes back a little bit behind the ball, so he's got a target straight away. We saw it many times with Cripps to Walsh on Thursday night, and we definitely saw it with Gaff last night.
Yeah.
And I reckon we're seeing it a little bit in the North Melbourne game with Pollock. Yeah.
No, exactly. It's an interesting thing. And then even furthermore on top of that, Tim, something I'm keen on getting your take. We are seeing that quick kick out to the ball on the wing, but then very quickly, as best obviously they can, teams trying to hit that key forward target as quickly as we can possibly kind of get it into. So sides with dominant and really strong forward targets aerially are probably licking their lips a little bit at the possibility. So certainly a Richmond have a number of really strong, tall forward options. A North Melbourne with someone like a Ben Brown. West Coast just have these plethora of key tall. I know you could go through most sides and say that, but does that build some extra relevance for you for some of these kind of key position forwards across some formats?
Well, definitely for Supercoach.
Yeah.
I mean, key forwards have always been pretty good in Supercoach.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying it's a lot more one-on-one chances for guys like Tom Lynch for Richmond even to not have to have a couple of guys hanging off him for that quick kick forward if they win the centre clearance. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you got to watch out for that sort of stuff. Mason Cox type play. I don't know if you'd be picking Mason Cox in fantasy, but
maybe not just salary caps, but if it's a deep draft, he may be on the board.
But that sort of player is what you're talking about there. The guy who'd benefit from the quick kick in.
No, certainly agree with that. Is there any other, before we move on, any other observations that you're burning to share with the coaches panel community that you've kind of noticed?
I was just going to suggest another player as well.
Yes.
That, like I mentioned Mills and I mentioned McGrath, but there's also a young kid for St Kilda called Hunter Clark.
Yep.
Yes.
He's the other one that I'm sort of thinking of. You know, the defender, mid-price defender that's playing pure mid this year.
Would someone like, a Brandon Ellis come into that consideration for you, or a Wayne Miller who's rumoured to be playing off the wing? Are they other options for you as well?
We haven't seen them, so I don't know. So,
Sure.
I'm only going off the guys that I've
Seen and observed.
In a practice game or whatever, playing in the centre square. So, but yeah, some guys like Hunter Clark, Edrin McGrath, Callum Mills, they're the guys that I'm going to be targeting this year.
Yeah, I like it. All right, there you go. There are just some of the observation from the panel of what they've picked up over just the handful of games so far this weekend. There are still more games to go. This is landing before, I think there's still 3 or 4 games to play out, if not a couple more before the time this weekend ends. So you're getting this nice and early on the weekend for you to be able to enjoy, but it just means we're not got the full analysis of the round just yet. That will come early next week. Let's talk about some unique options, because Rid's thrown a few names out there. What I want to do is I want to give you a format each, and then I want you to find me a player in every single line. It's going to be difficult in the rucks. I get that. That's going to be real difficult, but I'll see how you go. But I want to give you a format each to be able to find me some players that if you're looking for a point of difference, and again, not just for the sake of it, but when you go, no, I genuinely think they're in that contention range of being amongst the top couple, then let's have a conversation. Tim, in a moment, we'll go to you with AFL Fantasy. We'll get your thoughts on that. Rids, you've got Supercoach. And Jimmy, I guess we'll throw Dream Team. Now, there's some I'm looking forward to seeing some differences, too, between you both with Dream Team and Fantasy. I know same format in terms of scoring, but different in terms of ownership and the way people play the game. So those will be the formats. Tim, we might go first with you in AFL Fantasy. If they've got ownership over 5%, I don't want to hear about it. But who have you got for me in every single line that could be a unique option for the coaches panel community?
Okay, well, as you said, there's not too many in the ruck. So one in the ruck is Nankervis. Richmond's got 1.4% ownership, so pretty much nobody. So, I mean, obviously we'll talk about rucks later on.
Yes, we will.
But, if you were looking for someone who's got no ownership, really, if you wanted to be different, if you think he's going to improve on last year, then you certainly be unique.
Yep, no question mark. And I think maybe, again, haven't seen all the games this week. There's more to watch, more data. I do think that he's one of those rucks that will benefit from some of the role changes and rule changes coming through. So, yeah, I like that selection. I wonder if he's going to pop up in some of the other teams' names. But, all right, give me some other lines and who you got, man.
Okay, up forward, we've got Toby Green, has 2.7%.
In fantasy?
Fantasy.
Yeah, because he didn't get the discount, really, did he?
Yeah, that's right. But, I mean, it's basically if you think he's fully fit and right to go, because he's been sort of a 90, 95 forward the last couple of years when he's fit, firing, so.
Okay.
Anyway, just a premium or of other years that isn't highly owned.
I don't mind that. Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah, all right.
Midfield, this is right on 5%, is Yo. Elliot Yo on 5% in fantasy.
Yeah,
So, I mean, he's, as Rich was saying, his role is looking pretty good from last year, and I don't know, I just reckon if you liked him last year, he should still be pretty good this year.
Yeah, the difference is obviously you've got to pick him as a midfielder and not as a defender for you, but you're right, we saw right throughout last year, throughout the final series this weekend, just that really strong, big-bodied midfielder. You can't tag Shuey, Gaff, and Yo every single week, and if anything, Yo's going to be the accountable defender on the big big midfielder sometimes, and still win plenty of the ball, picks up the ball aerially, from a couple of years when he played off the half back. So yeah, I like that selection. Is it more a super coach pick though? Do you think, Timmy?
Yeah, I mean he's not quite at the top of the tree in fantasy, but
yeah, sure.
He's not far off it, though.
No, he's not.
Sort of in that second rung of guys, or a guy who could be.
You don't think he's top 5, but you think if we're having a conversation of 5 to 15, he's in the mix.
Yep.
All right, fair enough. All right, and then your defender, mate. Who's your unique defender that AFL fantasy coaches could be going after?
I don't mind Heath Shaw this year. It's new kick-out rules.
Heater.
1% ownership.
Oh.
So if you think
is that right? 1%.
1% in fantasy.
Just give me a minute. You keep talking. I'm just going to go make some changes. Look at that.
So, I mean, look, you have to expect that the kick-out rules are going to benefit him,
Sure.
and, that he's going to take a bunch of kick-outs and kick straight on, which he seems to like doing. So if you think that he'll bump up based on that, then he's certainly unique.
Oh, I like that. And it was only a couple of years back that he was pretty much averaging, captain territory sort of scores for us. Now, granted, a few years has moved on, a few players have come into that side, the game has evolved and changed, and he's certainly not gotten any younger, but, we know he can score.
Just on Heath Shaw, I mean, he did average 86 last year, and we consider him having a bad year.
I know. Who would have
there
thought?
There was only 6 guys average over 90 in DT and AFL fantasy
that we've got available. Yeah, correct.
So, I mean, he only has to take 2 kick-ins and he's over 90.
Yep. I like it, Tim. I like it. Let's go to Supercoach, Reds. You got a couple of unique guys in the lines to talk me through?
Yeah, I've got a couple. The first one was the guy that I noticed on... sorry, my missus just walked into the room, so I just said good morning.
Oh, that's cute.
Sorry, I just got distracted. So the first one I noticed on the Friday night. So Shannon Hearn, amazingly, is only in 5% of teams.
Wow.
That's a huge, and he's actually in my team currently. So I'm just, when I saw his lack of ownership the other day, I reckon he's going to be a top, 5, 6 defender.
Yeah.
In Supercoach. He's always been Supercoach relevant.
Absolutely.
Because of the way that he kicks.
Yep.
And if the kicking rule's going to benefit anyone, surely it's Shannon Hearn.
Yeah, exactly
It's
right.
the sort of weapon you wouldn't mind kicking from that distance all the way out. He'd clear the centre circle most kicks, wouldn't he, from there?
Yeah, if he's getting the 10, 15 metres to run, he's... We need to see more games across the next couple of weeks as well, but while we've often seen the kick out go wider, he's the one bloke that you'd probably think would go, stuff it, I'm going for the centre square. Just given that ability. I love that selection. Do people, Rids, discount how good he is as a footballer? Because West Coast were certainly phenomenal last year, ended up winning the premiership, but do people discount him just as not being one of those sexy Supercoach names, and so he slides under the radar too much?
I'd hope not, because Supercoach is one of those games where, the unfashionable guy actually goes all right. So, I mean, just look at Luke Ryan type, for Fremantle. He goes a lot better in Supercoach than what he does because of being the intercept marker and so on and so forth. So, Shannon Hearn. I don't understand the lack of ownership there. He's only 523,000 as well. So, it just,
There's some value in that.
Well, I think he's an absolute gun, and he's staring at, a 9,500 average this year with those kick-in rules.
Yeah, I like that call, man. Let's head into your midfield. Is there a unique option that we could be considering for Supercoach?
Yeah, so this one actually really, really surprised me. When you said 5% of teams, I don't have the point something.
Sure.
So he's actually listed as 5% of teams.
Okay.
But I rate him as one of the best Supercoach midfielders going around in Marcus Bontempelli.
Yeah, that's
so
low.
He's actually in 5% of teams. He's reasonably valued at 560,000, and the Bulldogs have got a nice, easy start draw. On top of that, Bontempelli's apparently, and we know we hear this everywhere, had a ripping pre-season. So, and we did see him in the AFLX games.
Yep.
So, I mean, obviously the guy, has no injuries. So, so he's my midfielder for you.
Yeah, I like that selection. And you're right, when you talk about the Bulldogs and how their year starts, it's considerably, compared to other teams, a little bit easier. Marvel Stadium against the Swans. They take on the Hawks in round 2, Gold Coast round 3. Gets a little bit more difficult round 4 against the Magpies, round 5, Carlton, round 6, Fremantle, and then, probably hits a wall a little bit at round 7 again when they play Richmond.
Again, you've got to look at the tagging options in those teams.
Correct.
Take away Hewitt in Sydney, and I don't think there's many taggers, in the first 8 or 9 games of the season.
Well, no, Howe might be the run-with player again for Hawthorn that they may choose to go, but it's certainly not done the jobs that others have done. Tuke Miller, there is no way he could run around with Marcus Bontempelli. Collingwood don't choose to really tag outside of Levi Greenwood. And then Carlton,
I don't even know if Greenwood's best 22 at this stage.
Yeah.
So,
Probably not.
Yeah, and that'll be an interesting point. Carlton, their best taggers now playing as a defensive forward in Ed Curnow and Fremantle. You're starting to look at Banfield. So, yeah, outside of a Hewitt, who's certainly probably got the number of all the taggers that teams have through there, that is really the only concern for coaches when it comes to the bond.
Okay, so let's go through the rucks. This one is a special, okay?
Ooh.
So lock this guy in as your R2. I know we're going to be talking later on about rucks and everything else, but these new rules should actually help a dinosaur, correct?
Well, yes, that should help.
Yeah, and like the Gold Coast went out and got guys like Miles and, Hall and Smith and so on and so forth, inside type midfielders.
Yeah.
They've got Tuke Miller. They've got guys floating through there. So I reckon Jared Witt is an absolute beauty to start with this year. 3% of teams at the moment. And they start off with St Kilda, who has no ruck. I reckon I could score 100 against them in the ruck. Fremantle, okay, who won't have Sandy because the big calves are gone. The Bulldogs, I mean, it's English, I suppose, or, the full-back, full-forward ruck in Trengo.
Yep.
And Carlton, and, I mean, we saw what happened through the week with Zach Clark in Carlton. So, I mean, they start off, I'm pretty sure at home for the first couple of games.
Yeah, they get their fair share of home games early on this year after barely not getting one in the first 2 months last year. They start the games this year a lot more at home.
He's 480,000 as well, so I reckon he's an absolute lock.
Ooh, okay, I want to talk about him in about 5 minutes then when we talk about our rucks. What's your
Only
forward?
for Supercoach.
Only for Supercoach, all right.
Yeah. I've got other ideas with other colleagues.
I look forward to that. Let's talk about your unique forward you got for me.
So this one surprised me as well. Because, if you talk about... We actually spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, Radio, on that unlucky to miss. And we're talking about a guy called Petrarca.
Yeah.
Now, if I said to you, who's the best young forward listed in the forwards, he's probably in the conversation every time. But... for some reason, no one's picking him. Melbourne's in the best, say top 4 teams for the comp.
Sure.
Petrarca's best 22 clearly.
Yes.
Clearly. And he's got a lot improvement in him. And, I mean, if he actually moves into the midfield, he could actually average, 100, I reckon. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm just staggered that he's only in, I think it was 2% of teams or something.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
And, okay, so another one, and this should make the Carlton supporters happy. I don't hate you personally. I just hate the club, Carlton, okay?
Just to be clear.
I'm sure there's some nice Carlton supporters out there.
Rain Man. He's a member of the panel. There
Rob's a lovely guy, rightio. So I don't hate you, Rob. I just hate the team you support. Rightio?
Yeah. Play on.
Petreski Seaton, I reckon's in for a good year, and I reckon he's definitely Supercoach relevant this year.
I like that. Just a little
he's
sneaky
in
one on the way.
0% of teams.
Nobody's got him. There you go.
0. Absolutely 0. It could be 0.1 or 0.2, so there might be a couple of Carlton supporters that have started him. He's only 365,000, around that ballpark, but I reckon he's definitely got 90 average in him in Supercoach.
Do not mind that selection. What about Charlie? No, he's under 5% of teams in Supercoach.
Yeah, no, I don't like key position players.
Okay. Even
unless your name's Tom Lynch.
All right. Okay, here we go. There it comes out. All right. Thank you, man. Like some of your suggestions. Let's throw to you, Jimmy. We're talking dream team.
Yep.
Who have you unique options you got for me, mate?
Okay, well, I'll start in the forward line, and I've got Tom Lynch there.
Oh!
We spoke about him in the 50 most relevant.
You spoke about him. I listened.
Well, that's fair. There's a whole article there that you wrote. I'll remind you about him and why he's relevant if he gets up for round 1. And I think there is a little bit of a question mark on that apparently, whether he's going to be right or not. But from what I understand of Lynch, he's played in front of an average home crowd of about 12,000 people, and I think his average losing margin is about 80 points over his career. So I dare say he'll be looking forward to playing Carlton in front of 100,000 in a couple of Thursday nights' time.
Yep.
He's currently in 2% of teams,
Nice.
and he's at 479,000 there. So I don't mind that. The other one, just quickly, is a forward that I really like a look of this year at the minute, just based on what North have done in terms of the players they've gone and recruited, and what appears to be the sort of gameplay they're going for, is Jack Zeeble, who's in 1% of teams in Dream Team at the moment.
Okay.
He's about 592,000, if I can read my own writing there. And I wouldn't be too surprised if that lifts a little bit from the 83 average that he had last year.
So he spent a lot of time forward last year. Some
He
new
did.
midfield inclusions. You expect him to jump back into the mid at all, or is it
I
based...
don't think he'll be predominantly a midfielder.
Sure.
He's shown that he is dangerous as a forward.
Yes, he is.
But he will still get a few clearance opportunities,
Okay.
I would have thought. And if he is getting that quick ball coming in from those running outside mids that North have gone and loaded up on this year, there is some opportunity there for him to get a few goals on the board as well.
right.
So
Couple
I
of
don't
uniqueness.
mind that as a sneaky unique.
All right.
Working back up the lines then, as far as my ruck goes, and I know he just got concussed in that St Kilda North game today, but Lewis Pearce is one that I had penciled in there. As soon as Longer went down, he appears to be the heir apparent. He's at 278,000 at the moment. He only averaged 56 last year, and the opportunities he's got, he wasn't the sole ruck for all of those games. But if he is the sole ruck coming into the first few rounds, if he does get that opportunity, I don't expect him to score hundreds.
Sure.
But he should score at least a fair bit more than what he's got in terms of his price point, and could make a nice little stepping stone while we work out which is the premium ruck we want to chase. So
All right. Okay.
I don't mind him as a starting mid-price option there.
Sure.
In the midfield with, again, only 1% ownership, is a guy that went at 105 last year and has shown he's got a very nice ceiling about him when he gets up and going, and that's Lockie Hunter.
Ooh. That was not where I thought you were going. All right.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of his. He's only at about... he is priced at that 105 mark, but if you think he's got a little bit in him to go a little higher, I don't mind that as a nice, easy selection just to bank away and not worry too much about him for a while.
It's a bit difficult for coaches to go there because I agree. I think, but when you get the value of people like Sloan, Merritt, Dusty, I don't want to go down to the dwellings of Rockcliffe, but guys that have gone 100 plus before,
Correct.
That are 10, 15, 20 points under. It feels hard to go for a guy at 105
It does.
that
but
hasn't done 110 before.
that's it. And that's sort of what you'd be wanting from him if you were picking him. But then there are a lot of those other guys that are priced a little bit higher than him. And if you're looking at McRae versus Hunter, for argument's sake, I don't think it's an unreasonable argument to suggest that gap is going to be a lot smaller at this time next year than it is now. So that's sort of what I'd be looking at there if you're game enough to go with it.
I like the uniqueness of it. I'm a big fan.
The one that I really love, though, and I've had him in my team all pre-season, is Jager O'Meara.
There he is.
684k. He's priced at 96, so he's a solid 70-odd grand cheaper than a Lockie Hunter, and a lot less than most of the other premium mids we're looking at.
Yep.
He's trending upwards in every facet of his dream team scoring, and he's still only in 3% of teams.
Ooh,
So
nice.
I'm very, very keen on that one. And down in the back line, another one who's currently in 0% of teams, according to Dream Team. There might be a Dogs fan out there that's got him, but that's Bailey Williams.
Hey, there we go.
He averaged 80 last year, or 79.9. We'll give him a little bit of rounding.
Yep.
He's was quoted in an article on the AFL website last week saying he spent all pre-season training only with the midfield group rather than the back line. And his scoring over his career, he's coming into his fourth season now. First year he went at 50, second year he went at 62, and last year he went at 80. So it's trending in a very nice little direction there for the young bloke, and I don't mind that as an option, as a very unique pick around some of the others.
Certainly is. That's very, very true. There you go.
And I'll just sneak another Tiger in there while we're at it. Jaden Short is at 540.
You want to talk about Asprey while we're here too?
No, I've got no real interest. I suppose you could look at him in Supercoach, couldn't you? But no, just Jaden Short for Dream Team, priced at 76, and he should get a fair share of those kick-in duties as well if you're going down that path with your thinking. So I'm bullish on his potential as well.
Just on
Hey, Jay.
Oh, yes, everyone's jumping in. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, just about a couple of Tigers. Brandon Ellis is only in 1% of teams for DT.
Look, I've got him written down here as well. I just didn't want to push my luck too much.
And I just wanted to throw Hooley up as well as 1%.
You got any Tigers you want to mention for me, Tim, while you're there, or you got a unique player?
Nah, we'll let it go.
Okay, well,
Already
I'll give you
mentioned
another
Dan
one.
Curvis.
Oh, you've done the Tiger quota.
Trent Cotchin's only priced at 80.
Oh, here we go. Anybody want to talk about Butler? No? Going once? Okay, fine, fair enough. All right, there you go. That is our quick thoughts of some unique Tigers you could be looking to bring into your dream team side. We want to talk some cash generation in just a few minutes. Before we get there, don't forget you can keep in touch with the Coaches Panel via Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And if you're loving the podcast, whether it be via Spotify or iTunes, certainly appreciate every rating and review you deliver. You can go and do that right now, even while you're listening to this podcast episode. One of the big dilemmas for fantasy coaches of Supercoach, Dream Team, and AFL Fantasy this year is what the heck you do in your ruck lines. Because as we alluded at right at the start of the podcast, you can build a case. How much water it holds is a different story, but you can kind of build a case that pretty much every ruckman has some level of question mark about them. That question mark could be injury during the preseason. You could probably put someone like a Sandilands or a Brodie Grundy into that conversation. Then the next kind of group are guys that are now ruck sharing their role and the concern about how that does or doesn't impact their scoring. Throw in probably Max Gawn, Braden Pruce, Geelong. They're sharing it with everybody. They don't know who their ruckman is at the moment. So there's kind of the ruck shares. And then there's the kind of the other category, which is sole ruckman. There's a clear relief option in the side, but we're not sure whether or not they're going to score enough to be in that top bunch of ruckmen. A la Sauce Jacobs, you could probably throw into that mix. Maybe a Nankervis you could throw into that mix. Maybe a Stephen Martin, a Sinclair. These are the sort of players. Is this the line, an open question for the panel, is this the line that if you nail it at the start of the year or conversely screw it up, is this the two selections you make at the starting squad, is this going to make or break your season?
No.
No, I don't think so either. There's always time to fix it. And if you do get it wrong at the start, there's no reason why you can't go and change that. I think if you start with, for argument's sake, Gundy and Grawn, and that doesn't work for whatever reason, you can downgrade either one of those to any ruck you like. Coming into the round 3 mark, and you've got plenty of cash left over. So I don't think that's an unsalvageable position by any stretch.
You said no pretty quickly in there, Rids, too. Is there something you'd want to add to the mix of that?
I think it's only got 2 positions on field, so you're only looking at 220 points. So even if you choose, say, a Grundy and he goes at 110, okay, and you choose a mid-pricer, I mean, what's the worst that could happen, a 40 or a 50? So it's only like 150, even with Grundy and Gawn going well, there's 220, so that's only 50, 60 points. And the money spent elsewhere, it's easy to make that up.
Yeah. No, it's certainly the variables of point generation are kind of there. Tim, you got anything that you've kind of been thinking about what coaches are and aren't going to do with that ruck division and how that's going to impact their season?
Oh, in terms of what coaches are thinking of, I think coaches have had a million ideas and no one's real happy with it. But especially with the JLT, you got Lewis Pearce concussed, longer injured. I mean, whether or not you're going to pick those guys anyway, Jimmy was. So there's obviously change to come. I know one thing that a couple of people have mentioned is you might even start with Westhoff in there. I mean, you'd have to want to have Westhoff in your completed team as a forward. But some people are just thinking, look, if I can't pick who I want as the second ruck, you could put Westhoff as the second ruck and then trade him into the forward line later and choose your second ruck, once you know who it's going to be.
Yeah, well, sorry, you go, Rids, and then I'll jump in.
Just with Westhoff, isn't he one of the guys that has the most question marks with the new rules?
In terms of?
Well, he can't start behind the ball unless he's playing one-on-one. And, I suppose he could play on a wing and push back, but then that's leaving a loose man on the wing for the opposition. There's a lot of question marks around Westhoff. Does he play deep forward? With Dixon out early on? Is there, with Lysette and Ryder playing? I suppose Ryder might be slightly injured at the moment. But, I mean, there's a lot of question marks, isn't there?
I think Hinkley said last week or the week before, just someone asked him on it, and he said he expects him to split his time between midfield and forward. But again, I guess it depends who's in the team on any given week.
Yeah, so, I mean, and what does that mean, midfield? Does that mean wing? Does that mean, he won't be second ruck if Ryder and Lysette are playing?
Correct.
So does that mean he's going to play a different role on the ball? Or, there's just so many question marks around this guy at the moment that, you're paying like his career best average. It's a lot of coin, like, for a lot of uncertainty. And, I mean, what is he, 32, something like that?
Yeah, he's 75, yeah.
Yes. Like, no, his age, I mean.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't suggesting what his future average is going to be. No, you're right. There are concerns. I know the argument is because of that dual position, that flexibility. I get that. But I personally would rather...
Sword.
Yeah, I'd probably personally rather lean to upgrading to him throughout the year and then going... Because that DPP link is gold if you can open that opportunity up. But paying for him at a price that he's never gone before, if it was 24, 25, probably take the risk, knowing what's coming to the side.
Yeah.
And his age, I probably wouldn't.
It's a massive risk, isn't it? Like, if you've got to hold someone, and let's be honest, Westhoff's had his fair share of 30s,
Yes,
in his time. Like, so, I mean, you're going to hold someone that has the potential to score a 30 or 40 at that price tag in your best lineup with your forward, whereas other teams, have got, like, say, 6 guys going at 90, 95, or better.
Yeah.
Well, that's a massive, massive gap, especially late in the season.
Yeah, certainly is. What are we suggesting here now? Everyone needs to make up their own minds and their own decisions about the structure that feels right for them. Every format needs a different approach as well, with different scoring, how many trades a week you get, the limited amount of trades you get. So I understand it's a really dangerous thing to say a one size fits all for every format. Is anyone here in the panel suggesting or advocating or even doing themselves a set and forget, lock who they believe are the best 2 premiums for the year, which across the formats historically you'd probably say is the double Gs of Grundy and Gawn, rightly or not? Is anyone advocating for a set and forget rucks in that pure sense? Or are you thinking maybe it's best hedge your bets a little bit with a, kind of a mid-priced option or a cash cow kind of option? And what are you guys kind of thinking?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't talk anyone out of starting the 2 premiums, and whether that is Gawn and Grundy in a Dream Team format, or whether you're looking at Goldstein as one of those in Supercoach, or whoever
Wits,
it is. Yeah, Wits, as Rid suggested before. Yeah, perfectly valid. I wouldn't suggest anyone take that out at this point if that's what you've been thinking about all along. I think at this stage, we're only at the very start of the JLT. I think one of the most important things we need to do is try and keep an open mind about some of these players. And if someone does put their hand up, be it Pierce next week if he manages to recover and get some game time, or whether it's English or Riley O'Brien happens to be playing ahead of Jacobs, whoever it's going to be.
Yeah. If
that mid-pricer does present themselves, fantastic. You can have a look at that. If you're not confident in that, or if you are at this point already confident in the premium ruck, I certainly wouldn't be talking you out of it at this stage.
All right, fair enough. Rids, any last thoughts on rucks before we move on?
I'd be talking people out of Gawn and Grundy.
You would be?
Well, I just think there's enough doubt, isn't there? Like, Grundy's had enough. He's had a toe injury for the last few weeks.
Correct.
And Gawn, I think his ceiling's gone with Bruce in the team if they're sharing that ruck load.
Yeah.
So I just don't see how a ruck can score 130 if he's sitting in the forward line for 40% of the game.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough.
And so with Grundy, though, just a point on Grundy, I'm happy to start one of them, okay, and then someone else. I would never talk anyone out of that, but I would talk out of a combo deal. I just don't see any sense in paying, 1.6 million or something across some of the format?
Ballpark,
1.7. That's nuts. That's huge money. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, fair enough. So, Tim, does that where maybe some coaches are kind of looking for the hedge your bet strategy of rucks, where they're getting the English and the Pierce kind of those sort of mid-price ranged guys, maybe cruisers to the limits of that in AFL fantasy, certainly. Is that where that kind of structure and strategy has some merits where you go, look, I've got question marks about all these big guys. How about I just pick a couple of mid-range guys and go, look, by round 6, it should be pretty clear who are the right ones to get. Has that strategy got some merit, or again, you think there's too much risk in that?
Well, it depends on the guys. I mean, everyone has got some sort of question marks. So if you're picking 2 mid prices with question marks, it's going to be hard to get them both up to a premium quickly if you need to get rid of them both.
Correct.
So, I mean, like, you go through them. So Mumford is the one that a lot of people would have looked at, but obviously he's out for 2 weeks.
Yep.
So is there any way you can actually navigate around that? And you'd need your R3 to play.
Sure.
Which doesn't currently look like
The
there's
one people were hoping for...
I reckon there is.
I think there is too, but the one people were banking on was Darcy Fort, and he certainly didn't put his best foot forward last night.
He's rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
I was trying to be positive.
No, I am. He wouldn't even make ruck 3 for Geelong, on that performance.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a great night.
But Archie Smith's the one.
Yeah.
Steph Martin started the season slow. Fagan's put the pressure on Steph Martin.
Yeah.
That it's going to be Archie Smith or Steph Martin in that number 1 ruck.
Yep.
And the other guy goes to the reserves.
Yeah.
It's plain and simple. He's already said he's locked in Oscar McKerney up forward.
Yeah.
So he's put down the gauntlet. I see Archie Smith's been named as the first ruck this week in the practice games. Stephen Martin's actually fit. So, I mean, the thing is, who's going to go? So if he starts Archie Smith in round 1, he has to give him 2 games.
Yeah,
surely he wouldn't give him 1 game and then let him go. So he might be the one that covers for Shane Mumford.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And then all it does take is an injury to a Bell Chambers or a Sam Jacobs, and there is a clear, really cheap option waiting in the wings for us. So I think there are some ones there, and there are plenty of options. My encouragement would be over the next week or two, try out some different structures and strategies with your rucks. See what the impact that has on your actual side. Maybe it opens up some new opportunities you hadn't considered and improves your side. You're right, though. Whatever you do, you got to have some backup plans. I know Jimmy's big talking about that throughout the preseason of lock your structure and strategy away, no problem. But if, for whatever reason, that one player goes down, you may have seen it with Billy Longer, Taylor Adams even over the week, this one player can totally impact your strategy and structure with just one injury. So it's certainly something to kind of consider.
Just one last thing about Supercoach and the rucks. I'm not suggesting in any way to hold a Witts or whoever for the year instead of getting a Gawn.
Sure.
Okay? What I'm suggesting is starting with someone who's clearly underpriced, whether that's a Sam Jacobs, whether that's whoever it is, a Witts, whoever, I don't care what the name is. Start with that guy, ride through the first 4 games. So if they have a good 4 games, that means 2 price drops for Gawn. You see what impact Bruce has. By that stage, Bruce might even be out of the team.
Yeah, who knows?
Rightio?
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows what's going to happen? But then what happens is you only need to find 300,000 to go to Gawn straight away after round 4.
Yeah, you're not having to find 800,000 to get the 2.
Correct, and hopefully Witts can limit the damage of that. Mate, the one thing in Supercoach that we need to pay attention to, and don't shortchange yourself by starting guys that are there or thereabouts. There was 500 points difference for the season between the second ruck and the third ruck.
Yeah, you want to get the big boys.
Supercoach. 500 points. For any reason, if Gordon Grundy are looking like matching last year, you have to get those 2.
I think you're right. I think you're very, very right. Before we wrap up this episode, I want to talk about cash cows. Because one thing I know I've talked about a fair bit over the 50 most relevant with a number of you and different cash cows have popped up is how important job security is, and that if there's no point having a cash cow in your side if they're not playing. So you want a guy that's got some relatively strong job security. Now, all these kind of cheaper end players have questionable security more often than not, but there are some players that we're seeing emerge through this pre-season and now through the JLT games that look like they're going to be given a red hot crack to start the year. But sometimes, Reds, there can be this thought process, right or wrong, but there's a thought process that these top-end first-year draftees, such as Walsh Rankin. I suppose you could throw a Bailey Smith if you wanted to do it. I know there's some historical names you can go there. I'll go and get, let's just say Sam Walsh. Let's just call a spade a spade. He's about 100,000 more than probably a bottom price midfielder. Let's use Constable as an illustration point. Is that a good use of our limited salary cap to go and get a guy like a Sam Walsh, who we know's best 22? We know he's an absolute future star of the competition and probably in Carlton's best 5 right now. And that's more of a statement about how good he is, not a slight at Carlton.
It's a little bit of both.
It is a little bit of both. I was trying to be positive again. But is that worth spending the extra 100,000 rids when we may get a guy who's within a 5-point range, but 100,000 cheaper? Is it worth the investment there?
Okay, first things first. Every time I talk about Carlton, I need to put this out there, okay?
Again, you've already done it twice this episode.
No.
You don't like Carlton.
I'm not bagging the performances or the players or people who go for Carlton. I just hate the club. Rightio?
To be clear.
That's all. I don't hate Sam Walsh. No one, like...
He's a jet.
People actually think, okay, because I say to people, oh, look, how many times do we make the same mistakes with these premium rookies in regards to cash generation? They think that it means that I hate Sam Walsh, that I've written him death letters or something. No, I have not done that. I love the kid. I traded to get the kid into keeper league
Me too.
this year. Okay, I think he's the best mid player drafted since Josh Kelly. And I think he could actually be better than Josh Kelly. So I don't hate the kid. But we're talking about salary cap formats here, okay? And we're talking about cash generation. That's why we go these guys. I've seen some of the craziest things ever. You'd think he's already won the Brownlow, he's won the Norm Smith, and he's won the Rising Star after one JLT game. Mate,
there's some love for
nuts.
No.
It
And
is
it's not
nuts.
like he was playing a quality midfield either.
Oh, look, and I mean, and again, Carlton played well. That was great. Happy days. Well done, Carlton, you know. They played good football. I actually enjoyed the game. That's one of the first games that, you know, the Navy Blue have been in for about 10 years that I've enjoyed watching. But Essendon were underdone big time. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yes.
And I think the fair assessment, okay, is didn't Carlton only win by 10 points? So let's just cool our jets a little bit. There was no tagging happening. There was no, you know, who knows what was happening. But Devon Smith, had a partially torn bicep, 3 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
Zach Merritt was in a moon boot for a month, came out of it a few days ago. Danaher, he's gone from not doing anything to having match. I don't know what's the go with Joe Danaher. It doesn't seem like he could do contact training for Essendon, but he could play match simulations and practice games. So he was clearly underdone, you know. So let's just cool our jets a little bit. Cool, breathe, move on.
So Jimmy,
let's talk about the topic.
I know you wrote about and you got to see Sammy firsthand.
Yeah.
There is a case to be made, though, for why you'd spend that extra little bit of cash to get him. Because if someone said if Sammy Walsh had 2 or 3 tons in the first 8 rounds of the year, part of me would go, yeah, I could see why you're doing that.
Yeah.
So there is a case for it. We're not trying to talk anyone out of starting Sam Walsh at all. It's more just going, let's have a conversation about what we do with him.
Yeah, exactly right. And as Red said, though, a lot of these premium price rookies don't end up actually delivering for us. But if any of them's going to, you'd think he'd be a candidate to have that potential to do it.
Sure.
And whether that's because he'll average perhaps around that 65, 75, maybe 80 if we're very, 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 very lucky.
Yeah.
But that will only be because he scored 340s and maybe a 95 in that journey to boost that average up.
Yeah.
It's what you're looking at when you're looking at Sam Walsh. It's not even so much, I think, a Sam Walsh versus a Constable thing, because I think Constable at this point, based on what we've seen so far, is probably picking himself anyway. It's Sam Walsh versus the last rookie that you'd be picking otherwise if it's not him. And so that 100K then, is that worthwhile? Maybe it is for that job security and what we hope the points are going to be. But I think you really do need to look at where else you could be spending that money. And if there are enough mid-rookies, depending on your structure, you might need 4 of them, you might need 7. If there are enough that you can fill your team and feel confident that each of them are going to play for the first month or so of footy, and each of them are going to average that sort of 55 plus that you need from a cow to get any sort of cash generation, then happy days. If you don't feel confident with those, then Sam Walsh is the obvious target to fill that gap.
Yeah.
If you're prepared to spend the money to do it.
See,
Yeah.
that Jimmy's 100% correct. So what you need, okay, is you need Sam Walsh to be averaging 17 or 18 points more a game than, say, a Constable, okay, to generate the same cash.
Yes.
But that's not including the 100,000 you've already spent on him.
Yeah.
So if that 100,000, okay, gets you, say, to, let's just say hypothetically, someone who's not quite a premium to a total premium and picks you up 20 points a game, then, and you're generating the same rough cash, from that lower end like rookie, then happy days.
Yeah.
But again, people have to look at the rookies as a whole picture for your team. Where are they? Where should they be on? Where they shouldn't be on? Who's on your bench that might be scoring well, and so on and so forth. Because we've already seen guys, okay, that were very popular. Brett Bewley was one. Ben Cavara was another, okay, who haven't actually been named in JLT1. We've also seen guys that have gone out there and, haven't really done much that we were actually banking on. Gibbons had a role which was not really friendly, and we were banking on him being actually on the field, in the midfields, a lot of us were. So you've got to be careful. But when it comes to pure cash generation, the guys that are cheaper, who can average very similar to the peak guys, often are the best way to go, because a 30 or a 40 won't stop them. They won't bottleneck that cash generation, like the guys. And we've seen it, Florent, Bowles, we've seen it time and time again,
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, you look at, some of the number one picks, to kind of start wrapping up the episode this week. You look at some of the number one picks over the past 8 or 9 years that you'd say classifies in that midfield territory. So taking the key position players out. Cam Rayner averaged 58 in Dream Team last year, 60 in Supercoach. Andy McGrath averaged 70 across all formats, a previous number one. Lockie Whitfield averaged low 70s in 2013 as the number one pick, and even heading right back to 2010, it was a 76 in Dream Team and Fantasy for David Swallow and a 79 in Supercoach. Solid enough numbers, but again, you probably may get a midfielder, potentially. You may get a midfielder that could do very similar to what Walsh could at a cheaper price.
A few years ago, okay, and I know this is just like an absolute, like once in a lifetime.
Sure.
We had Toby Green versus Steve Coniglio. Cogs went out and, did very well as the second draft guy, but Green was the one who you should have gone because he averaged 86 for the year.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. So you've got to be flexible. You've got to be, on the game. You've got to generate that cash. But you've also got to have that team balance as well.
No, it certainly is very, very true, and it's worth considering. Yes.
MJ, please, I'm not telling people to remove Walsh.
No one said that.
If he fits your structure and he fits your team and you're happy with him and he makes you sleep at night, pick him, for God's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. You pick the players you want to pick in your side. You should never, ever let somebody talk you out of somebody so easily. If you can get talked out of a player within 2 minutes, you probably weren't convinced on them. That would be all I'd say.
Don't lock in a Sam Walsh, okay, without looking at all the options around that price tag.
Correct.
Yeah,
very
that's
correct.
it. Especially at this stage of the JLT, where he's only played one game.
Yes.
And most of the rookies
Correct.
we want to look at haven't played at all.
Yeah.
You know what? James Cousins in Dream Team is only 30,000 more than what Walsh is or whatever it is. He's got a pure mid-roll all pre-season with Hawthorn. Why would you lock in Sam Walsh without actually looking at James Cousins? Who's the one that's most likely to be tagged out of those two?
Walshy.
Well, it's only common sense at the end of the day,
Yeah, exactly right. Hey, man, appreciate your thoughts on this episode today, man.
Yeah, too easy.
Jimmy, great to have you in as always.
Pleasure, thank you.
And thanks, Tim, for your work today too.
Yep.
If you want to go and check out any of the articles we've done in the pre-season, you can go and do that at coachespanel.tv, as well as keep consuming all of the podcasts. Go back and recheck out the 50 most relevant. More podcasts, more articles, and more JLT game reviews dropping right throughout the week. And we can't wait to keep journeying with you in the pre-season of 2019.